three. 1, 2, 3. Let's go.
Everybody, welcome to Teaching Crypto on a Monday, October edition. We're glad to be here. Please hit that like, please hit that subscribe button. Super chats are always available. Here today with MrFOMO. MrFOMO, we got some nice Bitcoin action over the weekend, up over 3%. And it late last night, tried to make a run at 28K, didn't quite make it. There seemed to be some resistance around 28K. Good to see Bitcoin in the green. However, until we overtake 28K, it is going to be impossible to make that run towards 30 and above that I anticipated. I said on Friday, I wasn't too optimistic about October in terms of getting to 32. The next 48 hours here seems critical if we want to grab 28 and make one final run.
I mean, in the last 24 hours, you did see that really hard push towards 28. We got rejected again, but we're above that 27 mark and holding there. So this all looks pretty good to me. We're waiting on a little bit more news. We're waiting on we are ultimately waiting on the economy to turn around. And unfortunately, right now, the economy, the world economy, the world news, everything seems to be up in the air. There's a lot of turmoil out there. And so with all of that turmoil, all of that bad news in the economy, you see Bitcoin doing this. I feel like that's a positive sign.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And on Friday's show that I did, I went back and looked and saw that from this point on, Bitcoin actually did a little bit above an 8x at the top of the next. Now, if you let's 27.7 times 8, you do the math. That would be amazing for Bitcoin. That would be amazing for the altcoin market. I don't think we're going to see quite as high of a mark, but yeah, considering we were,
I mean, we're not going to hit like a 210 to a 240K Bitcoin.
I don't think so, but I got to say, like, I'm feeling really good about the 90 to 120 prediction.
To be quite honest with you, the more I talk it out with friends of mine, I had a friend of mine over yesterday, and he and I talk about investments from time to time. He used to work for Raymond James, I think, and we were discussing Bitcoin. And for him, he said he won't get excited really about Bitcoin until you see a lot of big companies putting them on their balance sheet, which is
you started to see last bull run for a little bit,
right? Which it happened last bull run. You hear those rumors every time somebody comes out with their earnings report that this time they're going to say they have Bitcoin on their earnings sheet. I think this time would be the time for that to happen. But we also based on the price, where the market is, and this would be the time for them to put their money into Bitcoin and hold it on their balance sheet. But I don't see a lot of them announcing that they're doing that. The other thing is, and we've talked about this before, is the economy just isn't going to be in the same place that it was during the last halving event and during the last cycle. You're not going to have a lot of people with extra cash on hand. Inflation is way up compared to the last time. There's not going to be a lot of people sitting at home with time on the internet anymore. It's going to look a lot different than it did the last time. And so I want people to temper, their expectations for this next bull run, especially when you hear things like, 8xing from here. That would be incredible. And I don't want anybody to think that I don't want that to happen. I would love it to 8x from here. I probably will take profits way before that, but maybe just on the idea that it'll get there, I'll leave a moon bag, a small bag just in case it does get to 240. But like you said, I think 90 to 100 is probably where we'll land during the next bull run with Bitcoin.
And a lot can change over the next 6 months, right? You can still have time before the halving. Yeah. So and it is going to be an election year. So normally there is an effort for the parties in charge, whoever it might be, to prop up the economy as much as possible leading into November. So you normally see, remember, gas prices go down. I think you'll see, there's only so much people in charge can control, but I do think, and I talked about this on Friday, I don't think you're going to see a major recession coming in 2024. I don't think you're going to see the housing market crash. I don't think you're going to see inflation all of a sudden jump back up over 7%. So, and I do think over time, over the past 6 months, people are going to start getting more comfortable with this being the new economy. And again, I'm not an expert on this. And I do think people will be willing to spend more in terms of investing, regular stock market and Bitcoin. When Bitcoin goes over 40K, I do think you'll see some investors kind of roll in, big company names. We've talked about this before. Right now, it's basically the Michael Saylor show. And you do have Mark Cuban and you have Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, that are big Bitcoin investors. Not as much as obviously Michael Saylor, but it only takes a few. It only takes a few. And then all of a sudden, Elon, I think, I don't want to get into him on a Monday morning, but he does hold Bitcoin, but he also has shown that he does sell his Bitcoin, which is, that's he's perfectly entitled to do that. The problem I have is people make him out to be some type of crypto savior, which he's really not. But
he's just saving his own wallet.
But I do think, you could see some other people, and you talked about some institutions come in and announce, hey, we've got Bitcoin on our balance sheet. The big one would be if a major country said, we are putting some Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And the people that are advising these people, they can't be dumb. I talked about Friday how a good amount of the US population doesn't really know about the cycles at all, right? And so when they see Bitcoin going up in 2024, 30, then 40, they're going to think, oh my God, I'm going to miss out here. Because I still anticipate, barring some crazy situation with the technology and Bitcoin being so unique, I still anticipate Bitcoin someday going well above. We talked about going over 100K in this cycle, next cycle 250K, and so on. I still think, if you take good care of your health and you're watching the show, you will probably see a Bitcoin at $1 million at some point. It'll be a long time, right? It won't be anytime soon. If you got young kids like me, probably won't be until they're in college or something like that. But I do think that day will come. But it's going to take a lot of time. And yet we talked about on the show, regulation is probably coming. I think realistically, regulation in this space is just going to be slow to come. I don't think it's coming this current cycle that we're going to see. I think you can expect it to come by 2028, 2029. I don't anticipate regulation fully coming in 2004, 2005. I think what's going to happen is, my prediction is, you're going to see a nice bull run coming up next year into 2025. A lot of people are going to get out too late and get hurt. And then finally, the government will act and say, you know what? Bitcoin is here to stay. We do actually want to try to protect the people, not just say it, but we're going to have to do something about it. Then you'll see regulation. And I don't think you'll see the cycles not completely broken, but you're going to see a new reality in the Bitcoin market. When I'm using the word Bitcoin, I think a lot of crypto will be left behind eventually. A lot of the altcoins will no longer be legally allowed to be traded in the United States. Now, that might make a lot of people watching the show very angry, but also I think the space, whatever you want to call it, greatly needs some type of rules and regulation, because you just can't have every person, a 15-year-old, launching a coin in their parents' basement, literally with a credit card, and people buying that. And then a couple weeks later, committing fraud or closing the coin or whatever. That's not healthy. There's got to be some, some rules here. That's always.
I think some regulation will start to come in this next bull run, because you're going to see a lot of people, like Elizabeth Warren standing up and saying people got hurt. And they're going to play up sob stories like ours, and people like us from FTX and Voyager and all these other exchanges. So I think they will be able to play the politics to get some regulation across the board, especially since you've got Brian Armstrong of Coinbase calling out the SEC and calling it basically bureaucratic pantomime basically that they're pretending to do work and pretending to do things at the SEC, but they're really not getting anything accomplished, because this is really where they should be working right now in this new technology. But to go back to the companies and adding them to their balance sheets, one of the things that my friend and I talked about was that they're going to have to that a lot of these companies want to see Bitcoin become less volatile before they'll add it to their balance sheets. And big companies aren't going to take a chance on something that could lose 70% of its value within 18 months. And so what he was saying, or what he maybe was alluding to, was that it's going to take a lot more retail to come into Bitcoin to stabilize that price and to maintain that price through a bear market before these companies are going to start adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet in a big way. And so it really, I think, is going to depend on retail in this next bull run to show that there is still an interest in crypto. And then you'll see companies jumping in.
Well,
but those companies will end up getting hurt just like people who jump in late on the bull run. So the cycle is it is a good thing if you know what you're doing. But like you said, a lot of people still don't know about it. And especially a lot of companies don't know about it. And every time they jump into crypto and get burned, that's more of a chance that they and companies like them will stay out of it. And so I think it's important that we build the retail side of it to wash out some of that.
I think what I'd like to see is
volatility.
Bitcoin. I actually, and this is kind of crazy because our show is called Teaching Crypto. I'm starting to grow to hate the word crypto because of all that is included. I think Bitcoin needs to differentiate itself from the rest of the market. And I think that day will come when Bitcoin is more stable, and then you will have altcoins, but with regulation, only so many. You might be down to 200 instead of the thousands that are available now, and the other ones will be available, but it's you're buying them at your own risk, and it's not a legal transaction. So that I think that day will come. And we'll talk about UniSwap just here in a second. And so I think Bitcoin there is a big difference. And if you're just new to this show, we've got some new subs over the past few weeks. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, guys. Bitcoin is very different than the other altcoins. It's the established blue blood of it's the established blue blood of the industry, but it's very different because it's not something that can be manipulated like most of the other projects, right? A lot of fraud in crypto, and Bitcoin is not that. It's the one proven, and granted, it's been a little over less than 14 years, but it's the one mathematically sound digital investment that a lot of people, a lot of big names have thrown their money in. So it's very different than buying an altcoin that, quite frankly, once you are in the green and once you've not financial advice, you've made money, you're frankly foolish to hold on to. That's just the reality. Whereas if you have a safe place to put on your Bitcoin, and safe place because there is a lot of manipulation, there's a lot of, let's be honest, criminal activity sometimes in the space. And I think once Bitcoin becomes safer, you see more custodians come in. It's easier for the general public to have private wallets, whatever the banking institutions, like we've seen now, Fidelity offer Bitcoin custody. The more and more you see of that, the more and more comfort people are going to have. I think it will become stable and it'll differentiate itself from the rest of the market. I mean, I think Bitcoin and crypto are going to be not going to be together forever. And you're talking about stability. I don't think that's coming in the next 2 years, but I do believe over the next 10 years, you will see it. And that's why I do believe Bitcoin will eventually clear 100,000 for good, 250,000 for good, and eventually be a 500,000. Now the million, I not see for 15, 16 years, to be honest with you. But I do think that it is coming, depending on, I don't want to be negative here, but depending on your age and your health, I think you will see $1 million Bitcoin. It's just the rest of the space might be, a lot of it might be wiped out, but it's going to look very, very different. It's a changing world, right? And one of the shows I talked about, if you got into a time machine and came out in 2040, you wouldn't see a lot of gas stations. you would see a lot of charging stations, and you would see Bitcoin much, much higher, but people would think of it differently. Also, the next generation is not going to look at someone weird if they say that they own Bitcoin. That's
Like you're a
still
criminal.
around. That's still around. Not as much, obviously, it was 10 years ago. You were in the vast, vast minority, but it's we kind of went through a weird situation where we saw a lot of ads for crypto and Bitcoin 2 Super Bowls ago. And then the last Super Bowl, they weren't even allowed to be on the air because of all the negative news. So it's like we are still in a very, very young stage
Yeah.
of whatever this ends up being. And I think that's also important. The internet ended up being different than a lot of people anticipate. If you go back and look at the beginning of the internet, there were people saying, well, this is just the niche market. Only a few really computer nerds are going to be into this. It'll fade. I remember someone that actually had a degree in computers saying that in 1995, Mr. FOMO. And
Well,
now,
and
and so
the
go
biggest
ahead.
problem with with crypto, and digital assets is that people mistake it for only being about currency. Like it's just cryptocurrency, right? And that's something you touched on earlier. Is that becoming more of a bad word in the space, crypto and cryptocurrency? Because that's only a small portion of what digital assets actually are and what they're capable of.
Well,
And so,
yeah.
and you touched on another thing, and that's something that people need to know. But you touched on the wallets, and I think wallets and managing your money needs to become a lot easier because human nature is, you know, people are going to make mistakes, right? Like that's just the nature of the beast. You are going to make mistakes, but nobody wants to make mistakes with their money. And as of right now, most of crypto has no safety valve, right? If you
Mhm.
send your crypto to the wrong address, it's dead and gone. You burned that crypto for that company. And so I think that has to get a lot better. I think regulation needs to come in. There has to be a lot more safety valves. There has to be someone you can blame when something like that happens, right?
Well,
Like
and
that's
I think
just human
custodians
nature.
coming in
That's
is big.
that's what they're going to want to see. And so I think a lot of that has to come in before you'll really see the space explode.
And I think the space will look very different. Like I said, Time Machine, this show would be a very different show in 2040 than it is
Up
now.
and
I mean,
grain.
if you had a Bitcoin crypto show in 2010, you might be lucky to get 3 viewers, right? And now we see some shows that have been established. I saw a show yesterday get 300. Now it's George Cryptos R Us, one of the original OGs, but in a in a market that's struggling, had 310K views in a video. That shows you how much the space has come. But also, I feel like there's a long, long way to go. And it's easy to get caught up in the fact that it's been around for 13 and a half years. 13 and a half years is not a long time when it comes to investments and assets. Here's you didn't mention this. Um, the technology itself, though, also has a long way to go, right? Blockchain technology, really, right now, let's brutally be honest with our audience, is not that important in the year 2023. Now, in 2040, maybe even as early as 2032, that could look drastically different. So that's also what I think will happen. And I don't want to get too carried away with the future here because we go and talk about Uniswap, but uh, if there is technology that actually has real world use case, not crypto use case, not a just a place where people trade assets that other people don't care to have in the general public, but real world use case, and countries and companies are actually using them, that will bring more stability to those projects, and that'll differentiate those projects from the fraud that is rampant still in the space. Really quickly,
Well,
Uniswap.
what's the fastest currency that's out there? Just taking crypto on a currency level, we've talked about how small that portion of crypto's potential is, but just on a currency level, where is it at right now? One of the fastest companies out there, I think Quant or Algorand. There's a couple of them that claim to have 100,000 transactions per second. That's still less than half of what Visa and MasterCard and all these other ones are doing per second. And so that should show you not that it's behind, but where we are in the infancy of this space, right? Like the technology is getting better and better, but it still has a ways to go before it catches up to Visa. And so, being honest with people in the space, you are at a very early stage, but yes, it is pretty far behind where it needs to be to reach mass adoption.
Yeah, mass adoption, I think it's something you're going to see well beyond 2024-25. If you're expecting mass adoption in the next 18 to 24 months, I think you're being way over optimistic. We learned that the hard way in the last bull run, so we're here to tell
And
you.
nobody at your job is talking about incorporating blockchain. They're talking about incorporating AI. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And how does that affect Bitcoin and the rest of the market? UniSwap is, if you don't know, is a place where people go to exchange tokens. It's used a lot with private wallets. And now here, articles have come out about how they may require KYC. Now, I did some digging before the show, Mr. FOMO. They are not going to mandate KYC. This is more for the liquidity pools that want people that are under pressure from the government to take in names and stuff like that. So as of right now, it doesn't look like this is mandatory. So the headline is a bit misleading, but it is a shift in the space. If you would have said 4 years ago, Uniswap's going to require, they're going to ask for any type of KYC, people would have gone insane. Well, now we've seen.
They probably. I mean, I haven't been on X this morning or any of the Reddit forums or Telegram or anything, but I would imagine there's some people freaking out. I would imagine there's some people that are getting upset. But with this reminds me of what Stephen Ehrlich was charged with, and that was running a commodities pool without registering. And I think if they're running a stake pool, they want to be able to, know who's in the stake pool. That way, if something happens down the road, that they can, name names and give the government what they want.
Absolutely.
But I think that this is more of a response to what you're seeing in these lawsuits, is that these commodity pools or these staking pools may become a problem with the CFTC and the FTC and the SEC and whoever else. Because, if you were going to do that in the regular market, you would have to register as someone who's running a commodity pool. In the crypto market, you can just say, hey, we offer staking now. And so I think this is a response to that. I don't know for sure, but my imagination, kind of goes back to that Voyager case, just because we were talking about it the other day. And, considering what Stephen Ehrlich is facing for running the staking pools at Voyager, I think this is probably more a response to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, really quickly, someone asked me about alts on Saturday, over the weekend, and I mentioned Avalanche is up a nice little 4% since that mention. But again, the alts have a long way to go. Don't expect them to go crazy anytime in the upcoming months. We're looking at 2024 and beyond. For Mr. FOMO, this is AZcrypto. Have a great beginning of the week, and we'll see you soon.
See ya.
Hit that subscribe.